Hi, this is Luke Turner. I'm back from my second stream. Today we're going to be talking about working on this exercise tracker project again a little bit more. And I've got a couple stream-related updates as well. I've got a new monitor here. Should help me be able to keep track of chat or anything like that. I also have actually added a YouTube VODs link to my Twitch TV. So the VODs will be present indefinitely instead of being deleted after 7 days if you want to actually look back at the earlier stages in the project. Unfortunately, of course, the VOD from the very first stage of the project is now gone forever. And so before we actually get started, I want to take a quick moment to talk about what we did the week before last. So here's our app that we've started. It's Exercise Tracker. This is a simple exercise tracking app. And of course, the world doesn't necessarily need another exercise tracking app. This isn't intended to be, a new unicorn startup type of situation. It's more just an experiment for me to learn about some new things, using some new technologies that I haven't used before, like Drizzle, potentially some front-end libraries, which I'm not going to pick a specific one yet, but there's, some novelty in terms of the libraries. And also, because I'm streaming it, I want to use this opportunity to kind of talk through my process and share how I think about building an app from the ground up, which is also why I want to record this little segment talking about the very beginning part, because you can't talk about the ground up, if you're already on the second story, right? So let's talk a little bit about the first story here. And we can kind of do that by looking at the commit history. So the initial commit for this app, basically using bun init. Bun is a Node equivalent ++ JavaScript server. So similar to Node, but it's got some additional stuff to it. And then we added Drizzle and Express dependencies. Drizzle is an ORM, so it helps you load data from the database without using raw SQL queries, convert those into JavaScript objects with TypeScript types, and so on. Express is a web server, so very standard library that you can use to respond to HTTP requests. Then, we defined a migration, this very first new table in our database, exercises table, which we might use, we might not, but mostly it's just there to prove out that we are actually connecting to our database and doing things. Then there's a variety of little doodahs, and we wanted to start rendering these demo exercises. So here we actually are inserting something into the database when the app starts. And then when the user gets a route, we actually look that up from the database, and then we're going to use that to render an HTML template using Pug down here. So again, this is not real functionality, but this is proving out our database connectivity. Then finally, we actually deployed our application to Fly. And Fly is let's actually open this up real fast. Fly is a cloud that you can run your apps on, kind of similar to AWS or DigitalOcean, but with a different framework. I really like the developer experience that Fly offers. In any case, you can see that we have this exercise tracker app here actually deployed on Fly. And if I were to open this here, we get our HTML rendered, including this exercise, which is loaded from the database. So we can see that we have our full connectivity set up, even in our cloud environment. Locally, we have a Podman let's see, I don't have a script for it here. I'll have to fix that at some point, but we have a Podman container that runs the Postgres image that we use for local database development. Okay, so with that, let's actually get started into doing some stuff. And by the way, one other little thing here. I'm sick this week. I went on a family vacation to an event last Saturday, which is also why I missed last Saturday. Got sick, been sick for a week. So if I had a little bit of sick voice, apologies for that. and we'll see how long I can go here, but at the moment I'm feeling pretty good. Got me a drink. All right. So at this point in the app, I'm kind of considering that we have two ways to go. Let's switch over to our code window here. I'm kind of considering that we have two ways to go. So first way, we could start working on the front end for this application and basically figure out what we want the user experience to actually be like. We know we want exercise tracking, but what does that actually mean? Does the user have like a view for the day where they add exercises? Do they create a new workout object, so to speak, that they attach exercises to? Do they configure their own exercises, or are they coming from a pre-selected list? These are all decisions that we have to make eventually. And even how is the front end rendered? What kind of interactivity do we want on the front end versus on the back end? These are things we have to think about. But before that, what I was thinking of doing today is actually getting started on adding authentication and authorization to our application. So I want to just talk a moment about what authentication and authorization are. So authentication, the idea behind that is basically the user proving that they are who they say they are. Or in other terms, it's attaching the user's session, associating that with a user or account record on the back end and saying the user making this request is or owns such and such an account. And that, usually they have some kind of secret like a password, and then you assign them a session token and so on. And that's something that you don't really want to write code for yourself. You can, but it's a little complicated, and if you don't do it right, you potentially open yourself up to people authenticating as users other than themselves, which is a pretty big security hole. So usually you use a library for that. Authorization, on the other hand, is the next step of saying, okay, so this user is account 123. Are they authorized to make this request? For instance, if they're trying to look up a day's exercises, are they authorized to see the exercises for user 321? No, because they're user 123. Unless maybe user 321 has enabled some kind of sharing of that exercise. Like if it's a Photocracy model where there's social exercises, then maybe you can view those, but you can't edit them because they belong to a different user, and so on. Those authorization rules, which are application specific and can get very complicated, you can use a library for those. And especially if you're building an application where it's got multiple users, multiple programmers, like multiple people working on the code base, using a library or using some kind of conventions around authorization can be really important. If you're just one person working on a code base, though, sometimes those libraries are a bit too heavyweight, and you really just want to ensure that the authorization is applied basically manually. So we'll see which direction we want to go with that. But for starters, let's think about authentication a little bit. So here's a case where, switching back to Chrome, I actually am thinking about using a new library that I've never used before. Heard about this recently. It's called BetterAuth. And kind of the idea with this is, it supports, I believe, email and password. Well, we can see it right here. Email and password. And it also supports OAuth providers. OAuth providers are a way to do authentication where the user doesn't have to create a user and password in your app. Instead, your app is going to call out to an identity provider like Google or GitHub, for instance, and that identity provider is going to authenticate the user to their account with the identity provider. And then they're going to call back to you to say, yes, this user is authenticated to account foo@bar.com on Google, and we can create an account for them and associate the session with that account and create a session token and so on. And this library should basically handle all of that. Again, I've never used it before. So let's see what this is like. Let's actually look at the Get Started docs here. I don't really need that. I don't need a comparison. Let's actually get started. So we're going to install BetterAuth, and we're using bun, so we're going to do bun install BetterAuth. Okay. And let's commit that. We can see the actual change we're making here. We're adding this BetterAuth dependency, and we're updating the bun lock file, which is a binary file. So even if we look at this, it doesn't really, there's no point in actually looking at that diff. And so now we need, looks like a secret key. Doesn't really matter what it is, seems like. BetterAuth secret, generate. And we're just using this for local development, so I'm not concerned with sharing the secret on the stream. Presumably, if I was going to be deploying this to fly, I would need to use a different secret, and that secret I wouldn't want to share on the stream, I guess. Oh, sorry, let's switch back to code here. You can just see what I just did. I created the BetterAuth secret in .env and used the generated value from the BetterAuth docs. Okay, what's next? Create a BetterAuth instance. This is a little bit bizarre, but okay. So let's do this. The strange part is that it's trying to tell me exactly where I should put this file. I don't really know if that means that it cares or if they're just trying to like help me as a user think about it. But for whatever reason, let's do source auth.ts, see if this works. I mean, technically this is saying it should be source lib auth.ts. Let's see if it complains. And then we need a database. Let's see, so here we would Keasley, I don't even know what that is. Let's see if we can find out. Oh, I see. So Keasley is a library similar to Knex or something like that. This would be an alternative to Drizzle in a way, but we're not going to use it because we're using Drizzle instead. So we can use one of the built-in adapters here. Let's see. What built-in adapters are there? Oh, they have a Drizzle one. Perfect. So we're actually just going to copy this whole thing. And we're going to paste that into our app. And this is going to be /db. So here it's using this @ syntax. This is, I believe, called an alias, which we could set up in here. And I actually like to have that set up. So let's do that. The advantage of using this is instead of having to do, for instance, like a relative reference, is it just makes it a little cleaner and easier to understand once you have a lot of source files in your directory. But actually, I'll just leave it like this for now. And so then what we're doing here, we're creating a new BetterAuth instance, and the database is using a Drizzle adapter, loading, the thing from in here. And we're saying that's PG provider. Very fine. Create database tables. So here we can do this. Now, I'm not actually going to use npx for this. I wonder if bun has an equivalent command. Bun x. So it would be like this, bun x. Ta-da. Do you want to generate the schema too? Sure. So what has that created for us here? What we have is a Drizzle schema. So we're going to take this and we're going to put this over here in our schema file. And save it so that it formats it. This can go up there, and then we also need varchar. We're basically merging the imports that we had in the file with the imports that came from the generated schema. So now those things are all there, and then we can delete this file. And now we need to actually get Drizzle to generate a migration, which I believe is from this. Run migration generate. So now we have this migration, which is actually going to be creating these tables. And again, I mean, we're just following the getting started docs. Oh, sorry. Gosh, forgot to switch back to code. So what I did was we generated a schema, and I put that in this db schema file, and then generated a migration for that. And, you know, we can see here that like we're creating account, user, session, and verification tables. I believe verification would be used for email verification. User is basically the user. You know, that's sort of like the thing that our other tables might associate with to show ownership, like this is owned by user 123, this exercise. Session, which is, you know, the token for an existing session when a user logs in. Account, which usually account is used for the OAuth providers. So like, for instance, you might have a single user that actually could have two accounts, one on, say, Google and one on, say, GitHub, but they're both the same email, the same user ID. I think that's how it works anyway. That's how I've seen some libraries work in the past. So now let's commit these things. Adding the auth thing, adding the schema. And then we need to actually run this migration, which I believe would be migration run. I'm just going to run this. It's not going to work though. The reason it didn't work, can't connect to the database yet. I still have to actually start my database container. So let's switch to Podman here. And I'll full screen that. So here, if we look at our containers, we got to wait for it to finish running. Okay. Now if we look at our containers, we see that exercise tracker DB container that we created the other day. And we could just run this here, but I'm actually going to make a command to run this as well. Make it repeatable, make it easy to remember. Let's put something right in here. DB run. Sure. And this is going to do podman run. What was it called again? Exercise tracker DB. Okay. So now if I do that, then run DB run. What's the problem here? Oh, is that not right? Podman run. Do I want podman start? I always get these two mixed up. Because we don't want to create a new container. We just want to start one that's already running. I guess this is the one. Podman start. I think. Let's try that. Okay. Sweet, so it started it. Now, of course, this command isn't actually going to work unless you've created the database container in the first place. So it's not really repeatable on somebody else's computer. We could make it that way. And let's actually go ahead and do that real fast. So because I don't really want to remember exactly how to do this, I'm going to open up another app that I used a similar pattern on, Dust. Let's find Dust in here. Let's look at the package.json for Dust, and we can see that we have this command to actually run the database. Okay, let's switch back to code, and we can put that in here. And I'm just going to call it that. And we're going to, name it exercise tracker DB instead. And the password, we're going to use the password here, which is foobar. Again, because we're just running this locally, we're not concerned about the password. When this is deployed to prod, though, we will be. I don't really know what this last thing here is. So I think that should be Postgres. And actually, if we switch to Podman here, that should be Postgres latest. Okay, that's fine. Not a particular version. So something like this should work for when people want to start it afresh. Let's do DB commands. Okay. Awesome. I'm going to check on my stream real fast, see what it sounds like. How's my volume? Seems pretty good. Pretty good volume. Okay. Get rid of that. Okay. So what now? Now we keep going with the better auth setup, I guess. Let's take a look at that. So we did the migration. So now we need to configure authentication methods. And really, the simplest way here is probably just going to be email and password for now. I do want to set up something like GitHub Social Providers, though. The only problem I have with this is the need for the GitHub client secret, which I don't really want to show on my stream. But yeah, let's just avoid that for now. So we've got these options. And if we switch back to VS Code, we're going to add these options to everything else and then save to format it. Okay, so client ID, client secret. I mean, I could probably figure out how to get that to work on the stream, but for now, let's just leave this out and we can try it with the email and password. Okay, switching back. You need to set up a route handler on your server. Okay. API auth star. Well, I mean, they have some example code right here. Since we're using the Express library, basically what this is doing is like wrapping, or it's routing all requests from this path to better auth. So, you could imagine there might be like a login path, a logout path, like maybe a refresh path, like a callback path for when you finish your OAuth provider login, it's going to hit you at a callback URL. And so I guess this is how the better auth kind of hooks in to handling all of that. And that thing about the JSON middleware is interesting. I have to keep an eye on that. Let's switch back here. Okay, do this. And then this comes from better auth node. And then this comes from auth. Okay. And that's looking pretty good. We don't actually have the JSON middleware, but I'll just add a note about that. Just as a note for myself. Okay. So now what? Create a client instance. Client instance? Why would I possibly need that? I'm not sure. Call the function to create your client. I don't know. I guess we'll worry about that later. So how does this actually work now? So I don't really want something where I have to use JavaScript. What I want is something where I can sign on by having the user visit a URL. And what is this doing? Auth client.signup.email. Not really a fan of these. But I guess what this is telling me is that I kind of need to get some JavaScript going. Is that right? Calling API endpoints on the server. Client. It's a little bit annoying, but let's just go ahead and bite the bullet, so to speak, and actually get this client set up going as well. So what we're going to be doing here is something like this. So the problem with this is I don't really want to actually have to include a client. So let me talk through my thinking here. The sample code here, this says this is vanilla client code, but actually it's a TypeScript code in a library, which is going to need at the very least, a bundler like Vite in order to actually get this compiled into like a JavaScript object with all of these imports resolved that the client can actually read. Now, there's nothing really wrong with that. A lot of applications have it. It wasn't really the direction I was planning on taking this though. So let's see if we can find out anything about better auth without So JS. Of course, all the results are just like better auth without actually, referencing the library. Just talking about auth that's better. Not a huge fan. So one other option we could consider is using auth. Well, let's search for next auth, which I believe they're renaming to auth at some point. Can this work without using next? This is one that I've used in the past. And like this, these are kind of the routes that I would want to see. Contains its own library. Well, you know what? Let's just actually go ahead and do this probably with better auth. It's a learning experience, right? So what we're going to need is some kind of thing here. Let's just copy this code. And this is putting it in lib/auth client. I'm going to put it in a whole new directory here called client. It shouldn't be under views. It should be like that. And then in here, I'm going to do auth. So this is going to import create auth client from better auth client. Okay. So then what we need to do is find a way to compile this into a file that we can import in our view. So for instance, we're going to have something in here where it's like source I don't even remember the syntax for this. Let's see what the internet has to say. Hug. Hug templating language. Let's see what we've got here. Attributes. So it would be kind of like this. And does this have anything special for source ones? Doesn't really seem like it. Let's just look at the reference here. Oh, that's not really the type of reference that I want. Okay. So anyway, put it in parentheses. Do the things like that. Very good. So if I did like source, and then now I'm wondering, like, what the heck is the syntax for the source tag? What are the attributes actually called? So I'm going to look that up too. Is this not what it's called? Oh, script. What the heck, man? Can you tell it's been a little while since I've had to import a script manually? Okay, let's see what we've got here. Script source javascript.js, and then there's some things you can add here where it's like the type and loading it async and so on. I'm not going to worry about any of that yet. let's just do the simple thing, script, like that. Oh, and now I get autocomplete because I'm actually using the right tag. And then the source is going to be something. Say like main.js or something like that. Okay. So now the issue here is we actually need to get this main.js compiled. And usually I like to use Vite for that. We're adding yet another dependency. Let's do bun install d Vite. And the -d here is installing this as a dev dependency, basically saying that this is needed when we're compiling the client-side code, but it's not actually going to be needed when we're running the server. So if we look at the Docker file here, for example, when we do the initial install, this actually doesn't have this bit in it, but in theory, you can do the initial install, then run your Vite thing, and then when you're done with that, you can remove your development dependencies and only have your actual non-development dependencies in your container. But we're not going to worry about that for the moment. Let's just make a command here. Client compile. And this is going to run some Vite thing. And again, let's look at the docs here. Wait. Yes. Can I mute myself? Gotta blow my nose. Okay, I'm back. So let's see, how does this work? I've used it before, but it's been so long. We're going to want something along the lines of vanilla TS. Oh, this is interesting. You're just going to drop me right into a sample project. I don't hate that. So we can see dev, Vite, build, TSC, and Vite build, preview, Vite preview. Let's do plain old vanilla without TypeScript. Leave. If I can, I kind of want to avoid pulling in TypeScript just for the relatively minimal amount of client-side code we're going to need for this project. So here we're going to have these scripts. I'm just going to copy these. And I'm going to do client dev, client build, and client preview. And this we probably won't need. And really this should, somehow these are going to have to be incorporated together a little bit, I think. But for now, let's just leave it as it is. And here we're going to rename this to JS to remind ourselves that we're not going to be using TypeScript for the moment. Very fine. So now if I run run client build, actually first let's just run it and see what happens, huh? Could not resolve entry module index.html. Lovely. Lovely, lovely, lovely. So how do I configure this? So kind of the problem that I'm running into here is that Vite wants me to have this index.html file, but with Node, or I mean with Express, I kind of want to have a Pug template instead of an actual index.html. And I just want Vite to have the entry point be a JavaScript file. So I can probably configure that somewhere. Let's look over here. What options do we have? Build options. Shared options. Yeah, starting to feel like this is not the best thing. What if we were to actually look at using ESBuild directly? Yeah, I feel like this is the kind of thing that I want. A little bit less opinionated than Vite. So let's try it. So we're going to do uninstall ESBuild. And then we're actually going to update our client build command to do ESBuild. And then this is going to be client/auth.js for now. And it's going to bundle out file public/main.js. And then we're going to make that public directory here. And we're going to need to configure Express to serve that as a static asset. But for now, let's just see if we can actually get our JavaScript to do something. Why are you not happy? I don't know. Oh, invalid build flag out file. Did I not? You got to do it equals. Odd. Okay. Okay. Hey, we did it. Let's see what this main file looks like now. Public main. Right. So we can see here that this file is gigantic because it's our little bit of code plus everything that this imports and so on. You know, nested recursion, etc. All of these different files. And that's exactly what we want to see. And as far as what it's actually doing, it's not exporting anything. So for instance, or is it? Like it's declaring this variable, and maybe this underscore e is exporting it. I don't really know. But we can worry about that in a minute. So now if we have our view here, if we change this to public/main.js, and we can do npm run dev. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I was doing something. So here we have public main.js. We configured our client command like so. And basically that created this big old file. And so now in our Pug template, we're going to import that in our script. And I think that should be fine for now. So let's actually switch back to Chrome and see what we can see here. Wait, I'm not going to really use this tab. Oops. Leave, yes, leave. Let's see. Okay, so it did the thing. Was it able to import the file? I'm assuming not. So we're probably going to see, yeah, a 404 here. The reason this is a 404 is because we haven't configured Express to serve static files from our public directory. So let's actually open this. No. Static files. And again, since we're just doing something very standard here, we're just going to copy paste. Eventually, we're going to get to the point where there's less copy pasting, I promise. We just haven't quite got there yet. And basically what this is saying is for our app, it's going to use, this is a middleware, express.static. Don't really know exactly how that works under the hood, but it does. Hopefully. Anyway, so now if we switch back to what we were doing here, if we refresh this page, do we get, no, we don't get this. So I think we probably don't actually want the public in the path there, because Express might strip that out. Let's just do this, main.js. Now, switch back here, refresh. Ta-da, we have a 200. So we've successfully imported our JavaScript. And like what exactly this is doing, who can say? Actually, I'm kind of curious, because there was that underscore E thing. Is that not what it was called? Well, whatever. We'll worry about that in a minute. Okay, so kind of the idea here, we've got our static files being served. Close that tab. We've got ESBuild bundling our file. And I wonder, not going to be too worried about minification and stuff yet. That's definitely something we'll want to enable though. So actually, yeah, I'm not going to worry about that for the moment. Okay. So now we need to, you know, just kind of for, again, for demo purposes, to make sure we've got things wired up here, let's do a button. And this one is going to be button on click. I'm not sure how this works for Pug. Let's see. Sorry, this is what I was doing here. Button on click. And then what does Pug have to say about event handlers? Code. I wonder. Well, if it doesn't say anything special, then we can probably just assume that it works the same way as any other handler, which is to say strings to strings. So like this would be onClick alert hi, for example. And we can get fancier with this in a minute. Or actually, we'll probably do that significantly later. But we can add a library what does better handling of events. Oh yeah, and gotta put some text in that button, but it should still work without it. Hi. Cool. So we can see, you know, this is basic JavaScript interactivity. Login. And so now what this is going to do is auth client dot something or other. Let's look back at the docs again. Auth client dot sign in. See, this is a little bit well, whatever. Let's actually just kind of copy this whole little chunk. Switch back here. Sign up. Let's do function export function sign up. Put that in there. And then, you know, we could have an email, password, name, and so on. I'm just going to do email, test, password, test, name, test. Export async function so we can get that await going. Image, don't really need that at all. And then I would do like alert success, alert loading, just so we can see what it has to say for itself. And so now we have this exported function that in theory we can call from our Pug template. Let's see if that works. Sign up. And we have to remember to rebuild our thingy. So let's I wonder if ESBuild has a watch functionality, because I really don't want to have to keep rerunning this command over and over again. Does this do watching? Doesn't really say there. Live reload. Right. Watch and serve. So I don't really need serve. I just want watch to automatically start a build when you edit and save a file. So all I really need to do is add the -- watch to it. Okay. Let's switch back over here. So we're going to do watch. And we're going to call this client dev. And then we're going to have one called client build. And this is going to do minify instead. Okay. And this can also be source map. Cool. So basically what we're saying here is we have two commands, one for local development that's going to create source maps, and it's also going to automatically start a thing that keeps an eye on the file, and if I change the file, it's going to recompile. And then we're also going to have a version that we're going to actually use in the Docker container, which is going to build them just once, and it's going to use the minify option. You really don't want to use watch in the Docker container, obviously, because that's just going to sit there and, hang forever, right? Don't really want that. So let's run this in a new tab here. So we do bun run client dev. That's going to do that. And then if we go over here and we do npm run dev, now we have both our client and our server code running, being watched. Okay, let's see what's going on now. If we go to here, go over here, refresh. I don't have the actual live, so with it like a true live reload setup, the page will also refresh automatically with the updated JavaScript, but we're going to have to click the refresh button. That's not really that big of a deal. Let's take a look at what's going on here too. And if we click login, we get an error, sign up is not defined. So basically what this is saying is the export is not actually making that exported object available in the global scope, which is reasonable. I could do like window dot exercise tracker dot sign up equals sign up for now. I'm sure there's a better way to do this. And in fact, I'm actually going to need to do it like this. There's probably a better way to do this, and we can take a look at the ESBuild docs to see if there's a way to compile the module such that the exports are automatically added to the global object, but instead I'm just going to do this and see how it works. So having saved that now, if I refresh this, we should get the new stuff. If I click login, still not defined. So then my question is, did we actually get the new stuff? Seems like it. Oh, of course, but it would be window.exercise tracker, yes, .signup. Have to update the button. Exercise tracker, .signup. Switch back, refresh. Login, loading, lovely. Invalid email. Okay, so it did a thing. Looks like it posted to this URL. So because this URL is under that /API/auth path, it's automatically being handled by that BetterAuth middleware that we added, or BetterAuth router, I should say, that we added here. And that is seeing the sample data that I sent, and it's saying, hey, you just tried to send an email that's like not actually an email because I just did test. Let's see, I'm kind of curious to see what happens if I actually use something a little bit more proper, like test at eterna.org. Not a real email, but it could be. And then refresh, log in, loading, password too short. Lovely. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Let's try this then. It's a longer password. It might not be a better password, but now it's just as undefined. 500 internal server error. That's a little bit more interesting. So what's the problem here? The model user was not found in the schema object. Please pass the schema directly to the adapter options. The model user was not found in the schema object. I mean, I've got my schema here. But, I'm looking at this now and I'm kind of wondering because we've got this schema certainly, in this file, but the index file doesn't really know about that at all, does it? I wonder, if we look over here, So we could need to pass it in here, or we could need to pass it into the actual drizzle adapter. Let's take a look. If I go to installation, adapters, drizzle, db your drizzle instance, perfectly fine, but wow, look at all these plugins. I mean, this does have a lot of functionality in this library, so kind of looking forward to getting it working. Okay, let's look at drizzle, because that's, I think, where we're going to need to see something. Get started, Postgres. So, we create the table. There's this define config. Did I create this file? Okay, I did create the file, and it's got source db schema.ts. Makes a person wonder, this is provider PG. Does this have provider? No, because this is using dialect instead. And so what type is this object here? The database, and then config drizzle adapter config. What type is drizzle adapter config? Okay, so I need the schema object that defines the tables and fields. So it would be like schema is, and then we would do import schema from db schema, something like that. And then this would actually be star as, I guess. So basically, because this wants the schema to be a record where the key is a string and the value, I don't really know if that will work. So let's see. Give it a shot. Give it a shot. It's always a good idea. Log in. Loading. Undefined. Got another error. What error did we get? Relation user does not exist. Okay, that seems to imply that I forgot to run my db migration run. Let's do that. Don't use npm. Got some muscle memory there. Run migration run. Migration is applied successfully. Oh, I did npm run dev too. This should be bun run dev. Oh well. I thought it had seemed kind of slow. Okay, login, loading, success. Hey, something happened. What happened? I don't know what happened, but something did. That's cool. That's very cool. So now, actually, if I pop open Table Plus here, this is my database viewer thing. And I'm going to have to configure it. Sorry, I know you can't see this right now, but I will. Let's see, I will set up a quick share here. So if I do anything, this is going to be Table Plus. And then for the Table Plus one, we're going to make a new source. Sorry, I know the screen is black. That'll just be for a moment here. Window capture. New window capture. Table Plus window. And this is going to capture Table Plus. Match title, otherwise find window of same type. Sure. Okay, so now you can see that Table Plus window. Looks weird, I know. Password, foobar, localhost, Postgres. If we save, well, let's hit test. Connection is okay. Save. And then I have to update this again, I guess. I want this to match title, otherwise find window of same executable. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And then we're going to connect. What's the problem here? I thought it was able to connect. Edit. What's our user? Postgres, and our password is foobar. Foobar. Test. Connection is okay. So what's the problem? Database Postgres. Doesn't really matter, but can do that. So now it's saved. Connect. Password authentication failed for user Postgres. But why? Okay, well, let's not worry about that for now. Basically, what I wanted to see is the actual tables in the database where we should have now a user table or a user record, I believe an account record, and maybe also a session record that was created by the BetterAuth tooling. And I mean, we could just log it out this way. Like if I do console.log, select from user, limit 1. There we go. So we actually did create this user record. Email's not verified. It won't be able to verify it because it's not a real email. But this is kind of the thing. So sort of the next steps here, and I am going to need to wrap this up actually, partly because my voice is going a little bit, but also we're kind of at time. But kind of the next step that we're going to want to do is actually have this client pass in some real values here. And the way that that's going to have to happen is we're going to need some inputs. So this is going to have like a, input text name, username, and then input password, name, password. I guess I would call this email. Well, let's do both. So there's name, email, password, and then this would be passing in those values to here. So in order to do that, though, we're going to need some way of tracking the state of these. You know, and I could just like give them IDs to use a simple option. So like ID equals name, ID equals email. And eventually I'm going to pull in an actual JavaScript library to make this a little easier. But for now, we're just going to do it this way. Password. And so then this would be like sign up with the element by ID name, email, password. And then if we go over here to the auth thing, this will accept name, email, password. And because this is not TypeScript, it's a JavaScript file, we're not going to type those. And just log them out first to see if we can actually get this working the way we expect. Let's get rid of this alert because that was kind of annoying. Okay. And then this would be name, email, password from the parameters from the actual function. Ta-da. Okay, so now if we switch to the Chrome window and we try this again, oh, what's going on here? Type text. Yeah, I don't know why I put that little hashtag in there. I guess it's trying to tell me that I should be putting the ID there instead of in the ID. So let's do that. So this would be like hashtag name, hashtag email, hashtag password, and then I would get rid of these. Also, I forgot to put commas in there too. But whatever. Okay. Okie doke. So now what? Switch back. Refresh. Okay, so now our name, email, password. Click login. Invalid email because I didn't. Oh, right. So this has to actually be dot value. Dot value. Dot value. And again, a JavaScript library would make all this a lot easier. So this is what I just changed, adding dot values to that element by ID calls. Now if we refresh the page again, name, email at luketurner.org, password, login, success. So here we can see, you know, you could imagine this would be a form the user would fill out. Obviously, you wouldn't want it on the home page. Usually there would be like a link to a sign up page. Then the user could fill this out, or they could click the sign in button to sign into an existing account. We're going to have to implement all of that ourselves. But we're not going to do that today. So the next thing that I actually want to do here is take a look at this library called Datastar. And after this is going to be the last thing for the day. So Datastar is a library that kind of makes it easy to do stuff, reactivity in the front end, I guess you could call it. So for now, we're going to do something like this. I kind of want to install with npm, actually. So if I do like bun install data star federation. That's funny. And this would be -d. So that should have added data star here. And kind of the idea here then is over here. And again, like this is something somebody could just as easily install React or like one of these fully featured, oops, let me switch back to VS Code again. Somebody could just as easily install React or like one of these fully featured libraries to fully, render your Vue template. But I kind of want to stick as much as possible to doing server-side rendering with Pug and adding reactivity just where it's needed using a front-end library that's designed for that. And originally I was thinking something like HTMX, but I found out about this data star thing and kind of want to give that a shot. So let's switch back here. So for example, for these inputs, instead of having to look up the element by ID, we can bind the value of that input to a signal. So let's just start with that. So we're going to data bind, and we'll probably use this syntax for it, because I think that'll work a little better with Pug. So it would be like data bind equals name. Data bind equals email. And data bind equals password. Oops. Password. So then down here, we're going to do something to actually access those signals.